Here with those answers, we have Caroline and Marc. Will you please join me in welcoming them?
So, good morning everybody, and pretty amazing session that we kicked off next door in thinking about the future. This is bringing it down much more to what happens today. And the third person that we didn't introduce, but I'm delighted to have on stage, is John Halverson, who is, I don't know if it's global VP is the right type, but he basically runs media globally for Mondelez, so he's a very smart and really important guy. And as Joe was saying, I spent all my life client-side until a year ago when I moved to Teads, and I always had a very clear view of video advertising, which was sound is super important. And I had I think media is very, very simple, and I think people massively overcomplicate it, but I think there are three key factors that drive media impact. The first is reach, so are you reaching all the people that you want to be reaching in your category? The second is content, so are you reaching them with good content that really cuts through? And the third is context in which you're seeing that. But actually, if you look at what's happening today with more and more people moving and starting to consume video outside of TV, it creates a challenge because 2/3 of media effectiveness is driven by the quality of the content. Okay, so you've got to make sure content works. And a great piece of content can save a really poor media plan, but a great media plan can't save poor content. So getting content is really, really important. So I start from, okay, want to make great content, it's got to be with sound, because otherwise, TV would be silent, cinema would be silent, etc. But then there's a counter problem, which is, as people are starting to watch more and more mobile, the majority are watching it without sound on. So I want reach, but I want my content to cut through. And that's kind of a bit of a challenge that we're all facing, I think, today. And if you see also what's happening with Safari and Google now blocking videos starting with sound, that just puts further pressure on really thinking from the start about where that content is going to be consumed, which is a whole lot of context. So I had a hypothesis on the role of sound. And I think there are three buckets. I think the first bucket is a place where sound on and sound off makes absolutely no difference. And we've all seen ads, and you kind of go, actually, that would work equally as well without sound as with sound. Okay. I think there's a second bucket, which is my hypothesis, there's a second bucket where there is a difference. And clearly sound will make a difference versus no sound. But part of that hypothesis is if you actually recognize that in advance, there are things you can do to optimize that. So I think the worst thing as an advertiser is to make an ad that really focuses with sound and then put it in places where people are actually not going to consume it with sound. So really reflecting on that. And the third hypothesis, I think there's a smaller bucket, which is where sound is absolutely critical. Okay? And if that's the case, you should only be putting that bucket in a place that does sound. It sounds blindingly obvious, but I think if you took some of those ads and looked at media plans, you'd have a small percentage of ads that must work with sound that are in the wrong place. So that was a hypothesis that I had, and therefore I challenged my research team to say, go and either prove it or disprove it, which is what I love about these kind of things. You've got to start with a hypothesis, and you get your intelligence people to come and sort it out. So I'm going to pass you over to Caroline, who's going to tell you what she did against this challenge.
Thank you, Marc. So how do we know if sound is important? We just asked the user. That's what we did. Actually, I just got the results this morning, like half an hour ago. So really the few first results. What we found is that the perception of sound for users can be the perception of intrusivity, especially in the US, where you see we have 66% of users that hate when ads autoplay with sound, when they are in a silent environment, like for example, reading an article on a website. So there are places where you watch content with sound on because you are watching a video on YouTube, for example, but there are also places where you spend a lot of time where you don't want to be interrupted with sound. What we found as well, that I wanted to share with you, is that we had 22% in the UK and 21% of respondents that unmute video ads on Facebook, which means that 80% of the ads are watched without sound. Okay, that's on Facebook. What about YouTube? That's the opposite. 80 to 90% of the content is viewed with the sound on YouTube. When you look at ads, we have 36% of respondents and 40% in the US that mute video ads when they watch video on YouTube. Okay? So sound is really an important matter where, depending on the platform, sound off or sound on platform. So what we did next is testing different type of ads with sound and without sound to really understand the impact of the lack of sound on the emotional engagement, but also on the branding potential of ads. So we did two things. We tested ads with Realize, which is our partner for facial coding. So I'm going to show you just a quick video to see how it works.
This is the world's leading platform for measuring how people feel as they view video content. When people watch video at home or on the move, we collect their subconscious emotional responses by simply sharing their webcam. Test any demographic, anywhere in the world, and get insights from all of those responses in one simple dashboard. You can see, second by second, exactly how your audience feels about your video content. Whether it's a single video or entire campaign, you can view the highs and lows of your content's performance.
So what you see here on the screen is the emotional metrics that Realize is using to score ads. So we have attraction, retention, engagement, and impact. And we are using an emotional score that combines all those metrics. We also worked with Mirror Brown and their methodology. So it's a solution to pre-test ads so that you get an idea of their potential engagement and branding impact. It's a forced exposure methodology as for Realize. So what we found, the results, we have tested so far 17 ads, sound on and sound off. And if you go back to the bucket that Marc was presenting, we have a first bucket where more than half of the ads perform as well with sound on as sound off. Okay, so more half of the cases. No difference between sound on and sound off. We have less than 1/3 of the ads we tested for which sound on performed better. And we found a fourth bucket where 2 cases where sound off ads performed better than sound on. In this case, it was because of the voiceover that was confusing a little bit the user. On average, when you look at the emotional score, sound on and sound off, for sound on we had 4.6. The scale is from 1 to 10. So 4.6 for sound on and 4.1 for sound off. So it's not a huge difference. And when there is a difference, there is a way to optimize the ad to catch up, for the level of emotion. So let's have a look at this example. What we are doing really is taking inspiration from silent movies, adding text, adding captions, adding a visual element, like for example skin, adding logo to the ad so that we can grab the attention early and we can also enhance the potential impact of the ad in terms of branding. And when we are doing so, as you can see the curves, here you have the happiness curves for both sound on and sound off, and the enhanced version of the ad is the red one. So as you can see, the curves are very close, and we are really catching up when we are working on the creative and enhancing the creative. When you look at the potential branding impact of ads in sound on, sound off, or in a version that is optimized for sound off, as you can see, we have very similar results in terms of memorability, in terms of understanding of the ad, and it's sometimes even better because we are adding elements like, for example, logo that make it easy for the user to understand and to associate the ad with the brand. Same in terms of branding. The only weak metric is enjoyment compared to the sound-on version. What we found also that was interesting is that millennials audience seem to prefer a version with sound off. As you can see here, for 3 different ads, the 18 to 29 age bracket, we get a better score. For the version with sound off, a 7, when the sound-on version was 4. For the fashion ad, we had a 4 with the sound-off version for millennials, and a 2 for the sound-on version. So that's interesting. It's also reflecting the way millennials consume ads and video on the internet. So if we go back to the buckets of the beginning, so we have found this bucket where there's no difference. We found ads for which there was a difference, but it was easy to optimize the ad and catch up and get the same level of emotion and impact than the sound-on version. We didn't find any ad in this category yet, but it's a work in progress. And we found the first bucket where sound-off is actually better than sound-on. So that's for the results of our studies on sound-on, sound-off.
Great, so thank you for that, Caroline. So we've got a couple of people who are going to help us a little bit. So the first is John. So what's your position and your thoughts on sound from a personal perspective and then also from a Mondelez perspective?
Sure. So I think I found a lot of the research, one, thank you for having me, and interesting and validating for a lot of different parts. I think that a few things jump out for me. I think that as consumers clearly pivot their behavior into environments that are mobile, that are on the go, and they're looking for those snackable pieces of content, there are going to be environments where sound is not going to be a part of it. And we are going to have to adapt for that. I really loved, and I think too often we don't take the effort you put in to optimize the creative for that environment. Just doing a few tests, running 50,000, 100,000 impressions, and then going back and rework that creative, I think is a lot of things that we as marketers, as an organization, don't put into practice. I think sound is also an interesting idea in that, in the back of my mind, I still have this concern about where Google Home, where Amazon Alexa takes it, and what does a brand sound like? And just as much as purple is uniquely identifiable with Cadbury, what does Oreo or what does Cadbury sound like? Is a question I think that we'll have to figure out over time as we try and ultimately have sound be a distinct asset that could be very important as we move into a world of voice search. So I think that sound is not going away, but certainly, you're seeing some worlds where it's very important, and you're seeing some places where if we don't solve for this, we're going to face some real challenges.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And building on that, I've got a second hypothesis that Caroline's going to test in the future, but it's kind of that in a world of sound bites, so unfortunately sound bites are often linked to some of the political challenges that we have today, make America great again and regain control in the UK, etc. But we live in a world of sound bites. And with more and more content being seen without sound, I think there's a really interesting challenge for the creative agencies that says, if you were to build an ad around 3 sound bites, so actually don't start with the visuals, but you started with 3 sound bites to tell a story, what would that look like? And I think there's some really interesting work in that space kind of thing. I think the other thing is exactly as you said, John, that we're on the start of a journey. So, it's 15 studies, it's not 15,000 studies. But I think what it is doing is we're really starting to look at how can you really think about the context of where your ads are appearing and the content is appearing. And we've worked also very closely with P&G in Latin America, which were one of our key partners in looking at this. And Thijs, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what your findings were and your thoughts and challenges going into this, and how maybe some of this has helped to evolve some of your thinking.
Well, actually, I think...
Is this working? Yeah, I think so.
I think in P&G we always try to put the consumer at the center, right? And we are seeing that yes, the consumer behavior is changing, especially at the millennials. So we just need to adapt, and we need to understand how to do the best advertising that will communicate very well our objectives, right? And it has been interesting in LA, all the tests that we are doing together to see how optimize our ads for this environment. You know? I think we are just starting this journey, as you said, and I think we need to continue to learn together. And of course, I really want to also understand, now for me, the biggest challenge is understand this in the context of outstreaming, right? I think it's the next step that we need to understand how to better create for the environment, exactly how the consumer is scrolling down, how this will impact, and it will turn it in better sales and all that. So I think, as you said, it's a journey, and we need to continue testing to better understand that.
Which is great. And it sort of builds on another sort of philosophy of thought I got, which is really around, if you come back to the analogy of, you know, 2/3 of media effectiveness coming from the quality of your content, what always amazes me is the lack of understanding that clients have got in terms of how good their content is or isn't. So the analogy I always use is, if you're going to jump out of a plane, surely you want to know before you jump rather than after you jump if your parachute's going to open. And I think coming back to your point, John, about, you know, understanding whether this content is working, and there's some very simple ways that you can do very quickly that it means that before you go and spend your money, you can actually look at and get a very good understanding. And if you take the scores that Caroline was talking about, you know, 4.6, 4.1, they are low. And in fact, we've run 130 content pre-tests since we sort of started partnering with Realize, and the average score is 3 out of 10, which means there are some brilliant stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that isn't very good. And that's before you even start to think about the role of sound on, the role of sound off, the context in which it's going to be seen. So there's some really interesting new opportunities using technology, which is nowhere near as cool as some of the stuff coming out of the back of your head, but it's stuff that you can actually take and do today. But I'm going to open up to you guys now and see if there are any questions for Jonathan, for Thais, for myself, or for Caroline, in terms of, and just your thoughts on what we've said today. As we said, we don't have all the answers. We're starting on the journey, but does anyone have any questions from within the group? Were you just scratching your head, or is that the question at the back? So you all fundamentally agree with everything that we've said, and there's no questions you've got on sound on and sound off. Ah, well, there is a question. Fantastic.
My question is, did you find out in the survey potential difference between the campaign that were advertised also on TV or on other media with audio, or campaign without any TV or the digital out-of-home support? I mean, the fact is that maybe the difference could be also driven by a potential campaign that was already run on other media with audio. Did you find out anything about that?
There was no difference. We tested different type of ads, long form, short form, TV series, ads that were designed for digital, and there was no difference in terms of between sound on and sound off, really. Yeah.
I've got a few here.
Good.
But with the research, for the ads that you did test, did you ask beforehand whether they were designed for sound in the first place? So
The ad themselves.
Yes. So did you ask the creative agencies whether they considered designing for sound?
Didn't.
But they worked.
I can tell
It
you
would be
that
my
they
simple
didn't.
hypothesis.
Yeah.
Is that you don't think so?
I really don't think so.
Okay.
I think, you know, unless the world has changed radically in the last 12 months, there is not enough discussion had right at the start of the creative process. You know, and one of my passion points when I was working at Mars was making sure that you got media right at the heart of the creative process, so you didn't end up with a 30-second ad and then, oh shit, what we're going to do when it came down to media guys, but the media team were right at the start of those discussions going, not do we like the brand campaign or not is addressed too blue or too red, but thinking about, okay, right up front, what will this look like in a 6-second? What will this look like on mobile? What will this look like without sound? What will this look like on a Snapchat lens, etc.? And those discussions, and certainly when I go around and talk to senior clients, they happen very rarely. And therefore my hypothesis, would be that very little thought is given into that. And again, that's why I think it's really important, because you can have a brilliant campaign idea, but if you're thinking right at the start about, okay, what does that look like with sound, but equally as important, what does that look like without sound, you may get to you can still have the same campaign idea, but you may get to two executions that actually look quite different. And there are multiple examples we've got where actually you can flip the order, you can do some other stuff with the same campaign idea, but to get much more traction and start in a mobile world. I don't know, John, if you've got any thoughts on that from your Mondelez experience, or the microphone's gone.
I very much agree, and I just reflect on, I just came out of being the jury chair for media, and I can't say what the jury thought, but what my personal reflections is I look back at the work, there's a category on multi-screen. And that category really calls upon, or seeks to reward advertisers who adapt things from one screen versus another, or from one platform to another. And looking at that work, I think there are some standout examples, but across the larger body of the work, I don't know that I've seen us as an industry, and that is a shared responsibility across marketers, partners, agencies, come to a place where we are really executing to the full potential. In many ways, we are still taking, I don't know if our ideation is being truly multi-platform enough. I don't know if when we are creating ideas, we really think about how that manifests uniquely in one video environment versus another. I don't think that we're really pushing ourselves to really stretch. I think in many cases, we've gotten caught up in this very easy world of versioning. It's like, well, how many versions can I create? And how do I resize that? And I think that's just scratching the surface of the potential of all these platforms. And so, we're seeing a lot of work where our best work is very platform specific. But if we're going to get to truly great marketing and truly great ideas, we need to realize consumers ubiquitously live across all these platforms. And we've got to create a marketing process that ultimately, where creative agencies, media partners, clients design ideas and execute flawlessly across those. And we are not at that state today, doing it with any level of consistency.
And these are some of the top businesses, not some of the, so you kind of go, if the best in class is not delivering that, the question is, what happens further down the channel as well?
So I'll offer you a little case study before I go on to the second one. So I'll say what you said on good faith, although I think I'd like to challenge
and we can discuss that in the bar.
For sure. But with us, with HSO, I work very clearly, and we've got a big halo campaign called The Wolf, which is starring Christian Slater, kind of about cybersecurity, and he's a hacker, and we're communicating how important it is to have good cybersecurity, and HP is part of that. What we traditionally did is create tiny recuts of those films and blow them out and blast them across Facebook and other channels. And obviously, despite the fact that we had a Hollywood star in, the engagement levels were low. And then we trying to look at that, and then partnered with Facebook and did pretty much exactly what we just said, and restructured those adverts. So we have sound-off versions, recut with brand up front, and we've blown away in the difference between the performance in those ads compared to when we were just kind of restructuring for positive. Yeah, which is great. That's exactly what this bucket is. Yeah. That's exactly saying, if you put something where sound's important, then actually you can bridge that gap massively, and what you're saying is exactly the example of that. I think the problem is that a lot of people are building media plans, whether it's with us, with Facebook, etc., and not thinking about this step. And therefore they take it, they forget about the context of where it's being watched. The context is super, super important. I think at a macro level, a lot of people have taken their eye off the ball of context at the drive for reach at the lowest possible cost and forgotten where are people consuming, how are they consuming it. And the more that they start to do this in multiple areas, the more effective the advertising is going to be. It's pretty simple. And I'll just throw another question to give you a bit of something to spark off. Is that you said about memorability, which is, I found quite surprising, because when you have two senses, you would automatically expect to be, if you do the research from Oxford University on senses, if you apply vision plus smell or vision plus sound, you get a dramatic increase in memorability. So it's interesting that didn't quite tally. So
yeah, we have one explanation that we still need to test, but when you watch a silent movie, you have to concentrate, to understand what is going on. Have you seen The Artist? It's silent movie. You have to concentrate because if you want to understand what's on screen, you have to follow and to force yourself to focus. And that's what's happening with sound of a mobile environment. Users are very engaged because they want to understand what's going on, with the ad. That's why we get it.
So if you can if you took a very simple case of a drop of an ad that went like that, cliffed, and then like that, if just before the first drop you put something in to gain their attention, gain their impact, you've got a chance, and we're working on what that percentage looks like, of keeping them that little bit longer, engaging them that bit longer, and either moving that cliff further down or actually stopping it at all. So that's a really interesting thing. This whole idea of captions versus subtitles. So nobody reads, you've all seen ads where you've got tons and tons of text, especially on this little mobile. I mean, people are not going to do that. But how do you make sound bites or captions stand out, like in the old Batman, kapow, whatever, that actually attract the attention and make your story message get across? And enhancing the message, take out with interactive elements, overlays, and fundamentally one of the key things on video full stop is making sure, versus TV, and I'm an enormous fan of TV, is, at the end of every impression, people have watched 15 seconds of you, make sure you're springboarding them to somewhere else, whether it's more content, whether it's a call to action, whether it's a sales. Because even if you get 1, 2, 3%, you've just increased your effectiveness by 3% without spending and paying more. And obviously we'd love to work with you to understand a bit better. The critical thing I'd encourage you to all think about is really, there's an optimization job that can be done. But coming back to your point, George, and what John was saying, the more you start to put media context right at that start of the creative process, you'll have a much, much better chance of actually delivering stuff that will work much better than just purely optimized stuff. So, as I said, we continue to understand about what makes great advertising on mobile. 70% of our inventory is on that, and more people are spending their time with this. So really think about how you're doing that. And if there's anyone who would like to join us on the journey, then please come talk to me or Caroline or any of the Teads team. And thank you very much for your time.